Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You are watching TV Asia. I'm your host, Zaidi. This is our show, weekly show. It's Monday in Brisbane, Queensland, and it's 24th of May. I believe you are waiting for this show, Current Affair with Mr. Bernard Malik, BM, and Professor Grant Pitman, GP. Yes, and every week when we have the show, we always discuss about the latest issues and we will try to find out from our analysts what happening in the current affair world. And today we are going to discuss about the financial changes and financial plans. As you know, that Labour government is blaming that Mr. Smith, Scott Morrison administration is not ready to handle or to manage the agreement and business, especially with China. And this is a hot topic of the day because it's not only one reason, because it's leading to many other decisions in the system, in this world, especially when it's coming back to the relation between China and Australia. Let's go back to Professor Pitman and let's see. Mr. Pitman, thank you very much, sir. Be with us. Mr. Pitman, how you're looking the charge of the Labour administration that Mr. Scott Morrison administration is not very well prepared to handle the China, especially the dispute with the China financial plans?
The media, I think, is certainly siding with the Labor Party on this issue, that Scott Morrison isn't handling the issue well. However, you've got to understand that Scott Morrison and the Conservative Party are looking at the long-term issues for Australia, and historically we've been well and truly connected with China, but I think we're trying to diversify, and I see China wants to diversify its iron ore in other countries, and it may or may not have an impact on the Australian economy, depending on where China can get its resources. Alternatively, Australia has bought a lot of goods from China at a cheaper price, but that may require Australia now to rethink how it purchases goods, very similar to the USA. I think Mr. Trump was proposing a model where more things were made at home. And as for trade, I see most of the coal now that Australia was exporting to China is going to India. So there are other markets. It's China's not the only market in the world wanting iron ore or coal. So I think Australia just needs to have a look at what other options there are. And I think that's what the Prime Minister, Mr. Morrison's doing. He's saying that there are other markets out there and we can move across to those. Happy to receive Chinese benefits, but there are other countries also interested.
Yeah, I think it's making sense, but I'll get back to you. This is not the issue or with the only iron ore. There is an issue with the delays in everything which is coming from China. Do you think it is also linked with the same decisions, or it is linked with the COVID? That one of the things I will get back to you. And second thing is there, we are talking about that if you are going back to the far countries, that is going to be lead another cost on your side. However, when you have the neighboring country and they can work with you much better. So, but let me go back to Mr. Bernard Malik. Mr. Bernard Malik, thank you very much, sir, being with us. Now, as Professor Pitman already explained, that if you're talking about particularly about the iron ore mining issue, they already have a good plan. However, the Labour is trying to pretend in the system that Mr. Scott Morrison administration is not ready and not doing a correct measures to handle the plan with the China, especially the financially.
Mr. Zaidi, it's very, very interesting question and is being asked everywhere.
Right.
I think Labour Party is in identity crisis. They're trying to find their space because Scott Morrison has handled this COVID issue very well. Socially, he's strongly supported by public and media. Labour doesn't know where to keep their narrative. If you look at Labour statements before, they were saying the Prime Minister is not being concessional to China. China is a great trading partner. We should support them.
Right.
Today they are saying Prime Minister is not being harsh enough.
Yes.
So what they're trying to see, they're trying to stick a lot of stuff on the wall and see what are sticks with people. It doesn't work that way. You need to have a consistent policy on China. China is such a big power at the moment and a trading partner. You can't just try to see, throw this, see if that sticks, throw that, see if that sticks. Election is only 1 year away.
Yes.
Labour doesn't have anything to fight election on. So they're trying to make statements and try to fish public opinion in their favor.
And you believe that this is as you already mentioned that when he is very not aggressive, then they push for aggressive, and when he more aggressive, they say you are too aggressive. But Mr. Malik, you already know that what is the value basically China border has with Australian border. Let's keep in these terms because this is the neighbors country. You can find everything very close to it, and when it's coming back to anything which is coming, anything which is because we already moved the manufacturing facility from here, so we have to depend on some other places like China. Do you think that in this situation, harsh decision will ultimately going to be in favor of China, not in Australia?
Please understand there is also something called self-respect and compatibility of values.
Right.
When it comes to self-respect, China has been very, very undiplomatic in their approach. They condemned Australia like your gum sticking under our shoe. You don't talk those things to a respectable country like that. And then when it comes to benefits, please understand China is not the only option, as Professor Pitman mentioned. There's so many other countries we could go to. Yes, the strategies in life change. Earlier, our strategy was if you can get a cheaper cost of goods from China, why not? Today, we find the cost of cheaper goods is not really cheap. See how much damage China has done to the world by holding information on COVID. They could have given data to the world and saved millions of lives. That's admitted. The numbers coming from most of these countries, China, India, and other countries, are not the fair numbers.
Right.
What they're reporting in deaths is perhaps, in India, we can say with a lot of authority, what is being reported is perhaps 10%. Thousands and thousands of people are dying and it's underreported. China did not report its numbers at all. All of a sudden, Chinese deaths stopped at 80,000 and then they were reporting 1 or 2 deaths every day. When you see people who are not honest, you can't have a trading partner like that.
Right.
We are at a level where values also matter in trade. But unfortunately, China has been fed so much money and trade imbalance that they're very strong. They can sit there and command. I remember when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, she had visited Australia and Kevin Rudd was the Prime Minister. And Kevin Rudd expressed a bit of fear and anxiety about the way China was trading and said, I think we should control it. And Mrs. Clinton said, who was Secretary of State, that means the Foreign Minister of America, she said, how do you control your banker? So China has lent so much money to these countries everywhere that you know the proverb, one who has the gold makes the rules. China has given so much money, they are in a power to dictate terms.
Right. I think absolutely you're right, and in this case, it's difficult. It's really difficult. Mr. Pitman, as I already mentioned, that do you think that the delay, let's say that initially in our previous show we discussed also that many things we are receiving in our house from furniture, from electronics, from anything, mostly it's coming from from China. And because of COVID, initially there was a delay. But nowadays, the delay is very, very regularly. And it is a news that it is because of the China and Australia relationship. That delay is basically because of that, not because of the COVID, because they does not have very good relation. Do you think that only the iron ore issue, if we resolve to go back to any other country, does the rest of the things we can still import from China?
During the COVID outbreak here in Australia, the imports from China were very, very slow. And so much so that some of the retailers thought that they would not be able to carry on. We thought that many of the businesses that invested in Chinese products would probably struggle. But I think what's happened is the marketplace has started looking at alternatives.
Right.
And for example, I buy my 3/4 shorts from Lowe's, and when I looked at the tag, they were all made in China.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I couldn't get them last year. And then towards the end of the year, Lowe's said, no, the 3/4 shorts are now available. And I had a look at the tag and it said made in Indonesia. So I think businesses are very adaptable and realise that if they can't get it from one location, they can get it from another.
Right.
And I think the Chinese have started to realise that. And some of the information out of China is showing that they're struggling with iron ore prices themselves, and their steel for building new housing development has doubled in price in
Right.
China. So the problem with a country like China is you don't get all the facts about their economy, and it's a closed economy. And certainly gold's an important aspect, but we've seen many countries before default, and they're all worried that China will take them over. Well, China's never been successful in any world domination. They've struggled to get past their borders. So I don't see this crisis issue that everybody's upset about. I can certainly see they have an issue in Hong Kong and Taiwan, but outside of that, they may have problems in recouping their money. And as for taking countries over, it takes a lot more than money to take countries over. You need the goodwill of people, and you need military force and all sorts of things. And although they have the largest military force in the world, the countries all around them combined can treble their military capabilities overnight.
Right, right. And Mr. Pitman, how you rate the handling of Mr. Scott Morrison administration with the China relation? How do you think that they really, as Mr. Malik already says, that self-respect, there is so many values are there. And on the other end, as I already mentioned that yesterday, Labour administration, they say that they are not handling very well. What is your opinion?
Oh, look, Australia never dealt with China until a Prime Minister called Gough Whitlam arrived on the scene in about 1972,
Right.
a Labor politician, and in his first speech he called them comrades, which automatically set the tone for the relationship. In other words, the relationship wasn't Australia and China, it was a socialist government and a Labor socialist government interacting. And Scott Morrison is not a socialist, he's conservative. And so you've got a different political ideology. And the Australian government believes in free enterprise and supports freedom of people. So you're automatically going to come into difficulties with a socialist government communist government in China, where the state dictates everything, and here the people dictate everything. And as for the money side of things, certainly Australia gets a lot of revenue out of iron ore sales. But having said that, we have some of the biggest deposits of bauxite in the world. We have more gold mines than anywhere in the world. We have more uranium than anywhere else in the world. We've got plenty of minerals. I don't see a problem with us looking after ourselves.
Right. Okay. Let me get a hard opinion from Mr. Bernard Malik. Mr. Bernard Malik, look from the Australia side and look from the India side and look from the China side. Do you think that in this situation, I have my question has a two part. Number one, that do you think that in this situation, China will be more independent and will grow as a new superpower? This is the first part. And on the other end, after COVID situation, do you think India is going to be a good consumer of Australian exports?
Look, for any country to become superpower and become independent superpower as you think China would become, they need a lot of trade. They need money. I went to US in 1993. President Clinton was president that time. Interestingly, every year from then on, they started giving China as the most favored nation status. That means they basically got their goods into US free.
China is most favored nation of USA, correct?
Correct.
Right.
In 1993, this was a trade term. That means basically you can define it as free trade agreement.
Right.
The Chinese good could come to US for nothing. So obviously they were cheaper. Over here, if you start a factory, Mr. Zaidi, you need to pay your taxes, you need to pay your employee taxes, you need to pay GST. Ultimately, the cost of goods will go up because your employees have to be paid based on Australian standards.
Right.
There is a wage rate for everyone.
Yes.
In China, there is no respect for labor, no respect for minimum wage, no respect for working conditions. Whether you work 40 hours a week or you work, 80 hours a week, you get paid same. So obviously China could beat us in cost of goods. And that is what made Clinton very popular. The price of goods went down. He was happy to give China every year most favored nation status.
Right.
Yeah, it was very difficult for me to digest because I was a fresh immigrant into the country. I felt the US has a lot of respect for human rights. And I know US foreign policies were dictated by sensitivities to human rights in different countries.
Right.
US had respect for liberal democracies, like India was a democracy. But then nothing. They didn't care how the trade was, whether balanced or imbalanced, or whether there was a trade with India at all. So what we kept fattening China.
Right.
We ignored their human rights track record. Right? We ignored their labor practices. We ignored their manufacturing practices. So what was happening? Every day, millions and millions of dollars were going into China. That's how China became strong. And that was from everywhere, from Europe, from Australia. Many people were there for the greed of getting cheaper cost of goods. They did not care about values. And you would see that most liberal democracies in the West do the same thing.
Same thing.
They least care about human rights records. And then they complain about the United Nations when Human Rights Council gets Saudi Arab as president, or Saudi Arab gets elected on that. Oh, the Saudi Arab's record of human rights is very bad. Why? Did you realize that 30 years ago you were promoting a giant called China and approving their human rights records? So somewhere we need to know, we need to have long-term strategy, not short-term gain.
Very good.
And if you try to ignore those, somewhere you're going to pay price for it. And that's what's happening. So independent China is perhaps not possible in the current atmosphere. China thinks it's a lot of money, and they have gone into a lot of countries to start this Belt Road initiatives. They have been able to successfully take a lot of airports and ports in different countries. But slowly people are disowning China because China is becoming a rogue state. They want to show their power and go there. Unlike America and other, these are benevolent democracies. If they go there, they benefit the people there. So if all the countries that are getting fed up with Chinese behavior, number one, with China's behavior on COVID, if they try to disassociate from China, they will always find an alternative. If I have the money and you don't want to sell, don't worry about it. I'll go and buy from Professor Pitman.
Yes, yes, yes.
Right? The problem is if you don't have money, So these are rich democracies. They have money. They will make their choices. If they choose to make you rich, they will go and do trade with India, Pakistan, Indonesia, anywhere. You can find cheap labor there. Our countries will rise up to the occasion and do it. Secondly, you talked about consumers.
Yes.
Yes, India will rise up, Indonesia will rise up, Pakistan will rise up. We are capable people. How come an Indian or a Pakistani guy, when he comes to Australia or when he comes to Britain and when he comes to US, he succeeds? Because we are providing the right environment.
Right.
Same way, if Australia wants to shift its manufacturing demands to India, as Professor Pitman said, yeah, give them 3 months. They'll be able to perhaps meet in the beginning and then beat Chinese prices. So you should envision a stronger Australia, stronger US, stronger Europe, stronger India, stronger Pakistan, stronger Indonesia, all those countries that have, number one, lot of consumer, that have lot of labor out there. We just need to agree to support these countries. Things would happen.
Wonderful, Mr. Malik. You have mentioned 2 points, and these points are very important. And I'd like to get the opinion from Mr. Pitman also. Mr. Pitman, Mr. Malik mentioned that we should not look the short-term gain. We have to look the long-term benefit. Number one. On the other hand, he also mentioned that when China become the favorite nation, the cost of everything or consumable item is drop drastically. Do you think it's a good technique to keep the China as a good friend for every time, so then your people have a good time?
Oh, look, I think Australians like to be friendly with all the countries in the greater Pacific area. We're only a small nation compared to, say, Indonesia or India or the Philippines, China and that. So Australia has always had a good neighbour sort of policy with everyone. As for China and the future, one has to understand that before 1970, our biggest trading partner was the United Kingdom. They were our biggest suppliers of iron ore, and a lot of our goods had been for a century.
Right.
It was only the European common market that changed that. And they're now turning around, UK, United Kingdom, wanting to retrade with us. They're certainly not keen on taking everything, but they certainly are getting more involved. Canada is another country that wants to become more involved with us. And certainly South America and North America, there are countries there that want to deal with us. So I think the problem China faces is that it may be able to exploit smaller countries and like Papua New Guinea, but the bigger countries that have the resources won't necessarily always continue to accept it. The only thing we can't sell the Indians is our wines. You don't
we have to
drink
start
it.
drinking wines.
Yes.
Maybe you would have better luck if you started Scotch.
Wine.
Single malt Scotch, Indians will buy it any day and pay double price for it.
Yeah, Mr. Pitman. Okay, we are discussing about that. Okay, how the China relation with the Australia. What is your opinion about how the China or US relation at this stage with China? How looking this one? Do you think that you will find the same rift there also in relation between US and China?
Oh, look, when Australia became friendly with China in the 1970s, you've got to realise that America was opposed to Australia getting involved in China because they just finished the Vietnam War, in which China had sided with North Vietnam. And people like Richard Nixon and that strongly opposed Australia's involvement with China. So you're only talking 40, nearly 50 years ago, that was America's view about Australia and China. And then, as Dr. Bernard suggested, the Americans then saw China as an opportunity for cheap goods. Japan's market had sort of fallen away, which was the country for cheaper goods. So they went to China. And now it's gone full circle. We seem to go in a Ferris wheel. We go around and around. So different countries rise and different countries fall. Economies go up with one country, come down with another. And I think we're just in the cycle process.
Right.
And China and America were at its peak, say 5 to 10 years ago. And now the cycle's starting to change again.
Right. Okay. I think Mr. Malik, you already mentioned about the Clinton time. How you are looking now the relation between the Joe Biden administration and China's? Does they have the similar relation Australia with the China?
No, absolutely not. See, in US, there is also party politics.
Good.
President Clinton was from Democratic Party. Biden is from Democratic Party too.
Yes.
But Biden is I think among all the presidents that have been there for last, I would say 20, 30 years, Biden is the most experienced man to have been elected as president. Biden, he was lifetime senator. He was 8 years as vice president. He was the chair of foreign relations, Senate Foreign Relations Committee. That
Right.
means he had to vet out all the ambassadors that were appointed.
Right.
He had to meet the heads of the states. So he understands foreign policy like no one else does. Having said that, I saw lately his statements that he was not happy with China and he was sending them strong messages. I think when it's one thing you sit in the opposition and you criticize, but it's another thing when you are ruling, you make decisions differently.
Differently, absolutely.
So when you sit in the opposition, you are campaigning basically. When you are sitting in the chair, you are governing, and governance compulsions are different. But interesting point I want to make here, if you would let me.
Yeah.
We talk so much about China and Australia and how their relations would impact.
Yeah.
You leave China, nothing will happen. I want to bring to you some statistics which are really, really interesting. You know who is the biggest investor? Which country is the biggest investor in Australia? It is US. Second biggest is England. And third biggest is Belgium. You know there is a country called Belgium.
Yeah.
And China is ninth one.
Ninth one.
Why are we so worried?
0.7%
0.7% of our foreign investment is by China. 0.7%, not even 1%. 57% investments are from US. So if China wants to pull over, be my guest. Just stop, talking too loud on TV channels and start, this paid media, Godi media, what we call it in India, trying to, make all these big noises around everywhere. Stop this negative propaganda about Australia. Australia is a great country. There are people who love to invest. Do you think US would have invested 50% in Australia if they did not think, one, there was compatibility, second, that their investments would grow? What is an investment looking? A safe environment and then growth. Can you say the same thing about China?
No.
You can't even say the same thing about many other countries, including Pakistan and India, because it depends which government is in power, they change the rules.
Right.
Australia, any given day, would be a preferred destination for any investment.
Right. Mr. Malik,
I'm not very worried if China wants to go, let them go.
Right. Mr. Malik, there is one point also, and you are the best person to answer it. You already, because people are following you, you have few quotes also, and I find few articles also. Look, if education is, I think, fourth or fifth business for Australia, and then when you go in detail also, the Chinese students are number 2, number 3 also in the list of the all students. Do you think that industry is going to be impact a lot if we move? I'm talking about from educationists, from the Chinese student. Do you think that is going to be impact a lot?
No, no. Look,
Yeah.
it's a thing. If I tend to use brands like this is Apple, right? My kids would use Apple, my wife would use Apple, I would get an Apple laptop, and what we're trying to do is support Apple.
Right.
Right? Now, the giving visa is government's domain. If they continue to approve visas and give China level 1 status, level 1 means lot of burdens of proof are waived off for those countries.
Right.
Right? If I am from India, I am considered level 3. I have to prove my funds. My funds have to be 6 months old. My funds have to have a bank trail, a documentation. I have to have English, IELTS score, and that too at certain level. When China is given, again, it's like pretty much giving most favored nation status to China when it comes to students.
Right.
Right? I can tell you, you go to UQ, half of the Chinese students don't speak English. So I think UQ is 35th world ranked university.
And number one.
There is a certain level of partial treatment towards Chinese students while granting visa Chinese students while they're studying here. I know some of my family members that were studying in QET, and she used to tell me, she said, uncle, when it comes to us making presentations, we had to do the presentation. We had to explain the presentation. We had to answer the questions. When it came to Chinese students doing the presentation, they just had to do the presentation. They did not have to explain it, and they did not have to answer questions. So you're letting them pass. This is an unwritten policy with all our institutions, higher education institutions, that, oh, if it is Chinese, let it go. But right. If that's what you want, you will find students from everywhere. There's no problem. Just switch over to Pakistan. Every second Pakistani would love to come and study here.
Yes.
Pakistanis and Indians, we used to go to UK because UK used to be the nation we knew. All our first leaders, if you see, His Excellency Mr. Jinnah, Prime Minister Nehru, all these people were products of British education, and they did very well.
They did well.
Now, India is sending close to $1 trillion or over $1 trillion worth of business to US universities. In China, India is the feeder number 1. So it's just, you have to make a decision whether you want to eat omelets or you want to eat pizza, and whatever you decide, you eat.
Right.
So Australian government has to make a decision. We want students from India, we want students from Pakistan, we want students from China, or whatever.
Right. Mr. Malik, I think, Mr. Pitman, do you think that you would like to add anything, because you are also from the education background? Does the China's, let's assume, because that's the area where analysts can predict, because, and it's a prediction only, simply. So China is not responsible for any kind of pre-advanced information, or, okay, if something happens. If the situation goes worse and they stop their student, and as I already, do you like to add anything? This is first part of my question. Second part of my question, in the beginning you mentioned that for iron ore we have a better partner, and it's from India. Do you think in current situation, after that COVID situation, do you think that India will be the best choice?
Look, one of the things that people aren't aware of is the public universities in Australia were funded by taxpayers. Right. Initially state, more recent times by the federal government. What Treasury said to the universities was, you can commercialise your education, but we'll let you keep the profits, but the following year we'll reduce your tax, your money from the taxpayers to your institution. What the unis did was what they call the massification of education, where they saw it as a commercial advantage. So the academics, who are very bright, realised there was money to be made. the Chinese market was very much available in Australia, and we have strong Chinese communities in both Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne. So they took advantage of it to maximise financial returns to the universities, as well as the university executives, who were paid well over $1.5 million as an executive of a university. So there was probably some greed, perhaps.
Yeah.
Might be too strong a word, but there was probably a bit of economic benefits to the executives of the universities. Right. And I think the Chinese students were just part of the process to maximise that. The minister has just come out and said that the public universities were to educate domestic students, not international students, and that taxpayers' money has been diverted from the public sector to support Chinese students. And there was, I think, nearly almost 1 million Chinese students here. So why would I want to keep paying taxes to run a public university and the benefits are going to international students? So I think there's going to be a change in policy with the public universities. The private universities will probably pick them up. As for the Chinese, I agree that we have more of an affinity to India, who I won't say are British, but they certainly speak the Queen's English, and they understand us better. I think we understand them better. Wonderful. And we have a strong connection to them from World War II, because we fought with India in Africa and in the Pacific area, whereas we didn't have a lot to do with the Chinese. And Australia always sticks to its war partners. And I think the issue with China is that they may continue to come, they may take up the Russian offer, or as the minister said, education may be looking a lot different. Even places and businesses like Google and Microsoft may offer university courses in the near future. So it could be a different world of education in the next decade or two. Right.
And my second part was: do you think that, as you already mentioned in the beginning of this show, that India is the best replacement for exports, and India is going to be one of the good consumer? Do you think after this, drastic problems with the COVID, do you think that they were going to have a good time with the business?
Look, I think once COVID settles down in India, I think we'll open our arms up to welcome India back. And Bernard's quite right. When you deal with Indian people in Australia, you very seldom ever see an unemployed Indian. They work hard. They certainly play hard in cricket.
Yeah. And buy you Gloria Jean's coffee. Thank you.
Yeah. We play also good in cricket. I think the time is getting very fast, and I like to get the opinion of our second topic and the few last question on that topic. Mr. Malik, Prime Minister Scott Morrison. It's the good news from TVHI for the viewers that the overseas trip is going to be started at the end of this month, and Mr. Scott Morrison going to visit New Zealand. And does it is because you already looking how the international border is going to be happen, what is going to be happen? So do you think that it's an indication for all worlds that Mr. Scott Morrison going for overseas trip, number one, or it is going to, this trip is basically required for the development of both countries? It is due.
Look, I'm sure you can feel, everybody can feel the impact of closed borders. Yes. At the same time, there is compulsion on the government to keep us safe. So how do you bridge both? Prime Minister Scott Morrison is going there, and I'm sure you're aware that they have already started bubble flights.
Yes.
You can go to New Zealand, we can come here. While ago, federal government came and said, okay, during the budget, that we'll spend so much money and we'll give you vouchers. And the vouchers are given for people so they can travel.
Right.
So government wants to encourage this and give consumer the confidence that yes, borders will open soon and they need to open soon. I was at dinner with one of the federal ministers this Saturday. And I was trying to tell her, I said, if anybody needs any package of assistance, if anybody needs continuation of job keepers program, it is our industry, the education industry. We are most affected because we depend on international students. And she said, look, let's have coffee, discuss it. She said, I want to take these concerns to the education and the trade minister.
Right.
So hopefully it happens soon. Prime Minister's making this trip, though it is considered a bilateral meeting between both the leaders, Prime Minister of New Zealand and Prime Minister of Australia. It still gives a kind of vote of confidence to people like you and me and people who are connected internationally are somehow impacted by the closed borders, that yes, soon things will get normal.
Thank you. Let me, Mr. Pitman, do you also having the similar opinion, or do you think that this trip is necessary? Because if you remember, in couple of previous month, there was some different opinion from the both sides, especially when it's coming back to the COVID passengers from the New Zealand to Australia, then the citizenship from the COVID, and New Zealand bonders from Australia. And do you think that these both leaders need to meet personally, and then ultimately this relation going to be enhanced, which is necessary for both countries?
Oh, look, I think that's a shadow issue, actually.
Right.
New Zealand has about just over 3 odd million people. Nearly 20% of them live here in Australia.
Right.
And their economic survival in New Zealand rests in Australia, and right. They're coming here for economic benefits. Right. What's not told is how much money is repatriated back to New Zealand from right. New Zealanders living here. Right. And the New Zealand economy, if it were to be known, was yep. probably heavily dependent on Australia. Right. And when we closed the borders up, we closed up their economy. And what Jacinda Ardern will be chasing is to open the borders up more so that the cash flow between the two countries, particularly the employment opportunities for New Zealand, occurs. In my local church, probably 80% of the people in my church are from New Zealand.
New Zealand, yeah.
Very few of them take out citizenship here. Most of them are after economic benefits, and large parts of the economic benefits go back to family in New Zealand. So there's a connection between family, monies, and lifestyle between the New Zealand people and Australia, and I think Jacinda will be keen to keep that going to help her country survive economically.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Pitman. I believe these two topics which we covered today in top story from around the world by Mr. Malik and Professor Pitman. And we discussed about that how economic situation is going to be happen. And as Mr. Malik already mentioned, that when the labor is going to blame about the handling of the China, ultimately it might be a something which is generated for the election results only, and we don't know at this stage. But in a year time, these things are going to be shows as a result, and ultimately how the things are progressing. And second topic which we discussed today is about that overseas trip of Mr. Scott Morrison, and thus this trip is going to be used as a overseas good news for the overseas. So we don't know at this stage, but in next week's show, yes, we are going to talk about international flight. Yes, we received a lot of requests from the viewers, and they would like to know what's happening about the international flight. I believe our both analysts was going to bring something from inside and to share with our viewers that what's going to happen in the next week for international flights. In addition to that, we remember that India is suffering from the COVID, We did not discuss a lot. Mr. Malik has some comments on this, but next week we will also cover what's going on with the COVID and how India going to be grow with after this COVID, how the things are getting better, so many things. So these are the two topics we're going to discuss today. I believe today this week show will going to be a good show as usual, because we have our good two analysts. Thank you, Dr. Pradhan Malik, for your time. Thank you, Professor Pitman, for your time. See you guys in the next week. Till then, it's a goodbye from Shoaib.
Thank you, sir.